absolutely. It's been a long road since we started. I moved here back in 2005, and pre-2005 there had been a lot of excitement surrounding mountain biking in Copper Harbor already. Sam Raymond, former owner of the Keweenaw Adventure Company, had been running the Fat Tire race at that point, and using that to raise funds for the area. And there was a small group of people who were just super stoked about mountain biking. So when I moved here in 2005, I was I grew up down in by Hayward, Wisconsin, and got into mountain biking at a young age, about when I was 15, and started racing the Wars Series through Wisconsin, and then went to UW Stevens Point, and then was on the collegiate team there, and kind of just got into mountain biking and really fell in love with it, and kind of got into trail building just kind of as a side hobby. Obviously, it's just like I love going out and building stuff, like loved building ramps and little jumps and stuff when I was in college. And then when I moved up here, it was just obvious there was a blank slate, tons of opportunity. The trails that had been here, I think were more old legacy trails, and I think their style of trail building at the time was just more of like adopting corridors, like whether they're old roads, like logging roads and stuff like that. And I was just like, since I had some knowledge, a little bit of trail building, I knew of IMBA at the time, and I had the IMBA Trail Solutions book, and I brought everybody like to a trail building class down in Waupaca, Wisconsin early on, and so kind of opened everybody's eyes to what the potential was, and from there we that's when we officially formed the Copper Harbor Trails Club, was I think in 2006, and started up as a nonprofit, and really started figuring out how to really boost things forward and move things to the next level, because it was like we all knew just from living here just the potential. We have the terrain, we have the environment, we just have the like we're almost like a coastal ecosystem, really unique geography, just like all the pieces kind of add up to make just this incredibly unique like riding environment. So from then it was very grassroots, right? It was just like we had to figure out how to raise all the money, and at that point it was very little. Like I think if we had $5,000-$10,000 a year, it was just like, yeah, woo-hoo. Like we can do something with this. And had a couple part-time paid employees when I came on. So like I got here and I was so passionate about trail building that I just quit my job. Like I worked for Sam at the Adventure Company and was a kayak guide, and I was a bike mechanic, and I'm just like, you know what, like I think I made $3,000 the first summer I worked there. I'm like, well, at that point I might as well make no money, so I started building. I started building for the first 2 years. I pretty much built trails for free, like no pay, just was out in the woods all day long, cutting trails by hand, and I think that's we started making a lot of headway and getting kind of a bunch of energy, because people were coming up and riding our trails, and I think that everybody was always so thankful, so stoked, and I think that's what really kind of kept that energy moving forward, is really just the interaction with the other mountain bikers who were traveling here. It's just like, thank you for what you were doing. People wanted to jump in, they wanted to help however they could, come out for a volunteer trail day. Like our group rides were huge at the time, and it's just we had a lot of forward movement, and so that I think many years, 2005, 2010, we started building all the things like the flow, and we got Whoopity Woo done, and then kind of moved on in some of the more modern trails, the jump trails, and then I think it was about in 2010 that we started using machines and started pushing things forward, and that was really kind of that was a majority of my activity with the Trails Club. And then I went and started working for IMBA for the Trail Solutions program in 2011. So then I was working and traveling around the world, working with Trail Solutions, getting to work with a bunch of different professional trail builders throughout the industry, and really it was just opening my eyes to all these different building styles and different trails that I haven't seen, that I was just like, okay, like I could always take notes and be like, okay, what can I bring back to Copper Harbor Because no matter what, like no matter where I was traveling, where I was working, my deal with Trail Solutions is like I'm always building in Copper Harbor in the summer. Like that's the rule. So really with everything that's happened, my heart's always been here, and that's kind of why, you know, we're, as a company, Rock Solid. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the company, but we started it in 2014. I started the company and I started the venture and separated from Trail Solutions at that point, just because I seen how much opportunity there was in the industry. Like the bar was set pretty low. Trail building as a profession was still really in its infancy at that point, and a lot less established than it is today. And so it's like we seen that, you know, we had a pretty core group of people at that point. I think Copper Harbor Trails Club had grew quite a bit. I think we were getting to the point where we were having about probably $80,000-$90,000 a year annual budget at that point, and so we had 4 to 5 employees throughout the summer, and most of those employees did transfer over to Rock Solid with me, and we, you know, started doing a different style where Copper Harbor Trails Club was the fundraising entity, but then I would do a lot of the contracting as a result. So I started Rock Solid in 2014, and we quickly grew, and that's where from 2014 to now, Rock Solid, we have about 90 employees. We're by far the largest trail building company in the world, and it's definitely been a whirlwind. So for anybody who runs companies, like that growth path has been very aggressive, and but it's because we have such quality people on board. We've been able to put people into foreman positions, and you know, we had fabricators who were really talented, and we started a fabrication division, and then, you know, design, planning. Like we started moving some people into that end of the company. So we're trying to be run a true construction company, because even until now, a lot of trail building companies are just, a lot of them are owner operators. So they're small companies, like 3 to 6 people. And even the larger companies that are getting up into the 20, 25 range, it's just a lot of times they suffer from the lack of structure internally that it takes to run a successful company. So it's just like they don't have the processes and stuff implemented, and I think that's where Rock Solid is truly succeeded. Like all of us who started the company were like, you know, well, we know you can build so many feet of trail through this different style of terrain. We're always used to building trail in Copper Harbor. We're out there jackhammering, we're scraping rock, there's no soil, we want to build jumps, we're moving it all over the place, and we're always like trying to think of like how do we do this the most efficiently, right? Because it was like so essential for any kind of trail to get built here. We had to kind of maximize the efficiency to be able to utilize the limited resources that we had to produce trail here. And it's like, so if we had, you know, 40, 50 grand, we're like, oh, well, we want to try to build 2-3 miles of trail for that. Like, we got to go fast and we got to do quality work. And so like Rock Solid was really born with that mentality, is just like, we want to take that mentality to the industry and figure out how we can really competitively build high quality trails. And I think that's why we've been so successful. But you know, with that in mind, you know, there's just that's how we are to where we are today. And the trail system has been incredibly successful for only having 50 something miles of trails that we do. It was like 40 miles for quite a long time, and we were kind of rated one of the 10 best riding destinations in the world. And it's like, oh, that's incredible. But us as locals, we're sitting here just like, well, there's so much untapped potential yet in the Keweenaw Peninsula. So a lot of things like have fell into place in recent years. Number one, the Nature Conservancy just purchased 33,000 acres right on the tip of the peninsula here, which was incredible news, because that's something that we had all been really pushing for really hard with our continued investment into the region. Because we knew that, you know, as we invested in things like East Bluff Bike Park, Trails End Campground. Things are starting to happen in Copper Harbor, much like they are in a lot of major outdoor destinations, right? People want to live. They want to be in outdoor destinations, and COVID really kind of like pushed that to the forefront because we were seeing the increased traffic. As a result, real estate went through the roof, and we know that there's a lot of competition for these spaces, and that it can be a good thing, right? You want to have a flourishing community. You want to have a robust economy. Tourism is really our only economy up here. But at the same time, we want to be conscious and protect the resource too. And you know that as humans, we have a tendency to love things to death. I mean, we do. I mean, look at Colorado. You drive, through the mountains, and it's just like you got mansions up on the hills, and it's just like, well, it's probably great from a capitalistic standpoint where you're trying to sell properties, you see continued development, but from a conservation standpoint, it's really not that great, because at what point does the resource become degraded where it's not attractive for the user anymore? So that's something that we've been trying to take into account when we kind of push our plans forward for Copper Harbor. Number one, we knew the first thing needed to be conservation. We need to be able to protect the resource, and the resource exists because of the lack of development, because of the ability to kind of get into the natural environment quickly, right? It's always been known you've been able to park right here in Copper Harbor, you get at the trailhead and you're out and you're gone. You're away from everything. And so it's like that true authentic outdoor experience. How do we protect that? Well, number one, conserve all the land. So that happened, which is excellent. And now it's just building partners, right, to make this all happen. Because the reality is if we see this flourishing onto the future, we have to have really this sustainable plan for how it's all going to be accomplished, right? Like we're going to have maintenance, we're going to have trail construction, we're going to have infrastructure to really support the entire network, to get people out into the experience and to kind of limit how much that excess traffic is taxing the existing infrastructure in downtown Copper Harbor. So we need to plan all those things out effectively. And so I think we put together a pretty robust business plan. We have over 150 miles of trail master planned for development. And as we move through kind of the permitting processes with the state, and as we kind of go through the land use plan with the Nature Conservancy, we see that that's going to be feasible. Hopefully within the next 10 years, we're looking at adding probably up to 150 miles of trails. And so the future is truly bright for Copper Harbor. And I think, as people who've lived here forever, we're super excited. This has kind of been a life passion, and it's coming to fruition. So, yeah. So as far as how everyone can help here, I mean, I think that's, the recognition is the way that everything's evolved. Now we're actually getting to the point where we're learning how to establish partnerships, right? Copper Harbor Trails Club, Rock Solid, Grant Township. What are all the pieces that, each entity plays, the role in development? We're putting this all together, and we're really trying to bring volunteerism back and bring people into the fold. And it's like events like this that have been super successful because of the energy of Copper Harbor. We want to get back. We want to start having the regular group rides and gatherings and just kind of all the fun things that go along with the energy and that it takes to build something like this. So it's, we want people to be able to look up group rides, come up and join us any other weekend as well. Not just, these event weekends. And during the weeks too, we're going to start kicking off and doing Wednesday night group rides. And people will be able to find us and jump in and, talk trails, talk about what's happening, and just hang out, because that's kind of how it's all come about. So, but with that, really, I'd just like to open it up for questions, because obviously, I'm sure there's plenty of questions.
Yes.
Casey?
Those sweet Unimogs I see out at Trails and Camp. Tell me about those.
Yeah, so those will be set up. We're actually starting up shuttle services out at East Bluff this year. So we got about 3 more downhills scheduled to be built this summer. So that, in addition to the 3 that are on there, we figured that'll make it feasible to start running a shuttle service out there.
Oh, yeah.
We have, hopefully we're starting up the campground this summer. So there'll also be a campground out there with cabins and campsites. But we plan to expand the parking lot in the future. So that's like a main hub for people to go to and just kind of set up for their adventure. Obviously, you kind of integrated right into the Keweenaw Point Trail. So once again, as traffic in town becomes more congested, the idea is to start, kind of pushing people out of town a little bit.
So what's the timeline on those
Shuttles should be starting up about July 1st.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coming back. Coming. Awesome.
I heard some about some plannings out at Trails and Campground, like a restaurant, and you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started a farm out there. So we're, one thing I've been trying to piece into the equation is what do we as a user group want? And biggest thing on my list is healthy food. And we're at the end of the supply chain here, so it's most of the food comes off the Cisco truck, which is great, but what is our opportunity to get a true farm to table experience up here? So over the last 6 years, we got the farm in the works. We've been investing in that pretty heavily. This year it'll be a full grown production farm where we'll have a couple of farm stands locally. We sell back to the co-op and hit farmers markets, all that kind of stuff. But the idea is to bring the farm to a point where it's producing enough to also serve a restaurant too. So the restaurant will be going in out at Trails End. We're getting the architecture done. We're probably about 3 years out from actual construction. But after that, I would assume that we'll be pretty close to having the restaurant plan up and dialed and moving. So
That's cool.
Yeah, what's your favorite trail system or even outside of Copper Harbor that you've worked on?
That's always a hard question for me. I would have to say that Bentonville has its ups and downs. The entire Northwest Arkansas region, it's hard to wrap your head around it entirety because of the amount of investment that goes into it. Sometimes it kind of feels like Disneyland, which is not always what you think as a trail builder is necessary to produce a high quality trail experience. But what I've learned is for the users that are going to those locations, it's a necessary experience because those are the areas, and from what I've seen, that are truly generating high amounts of new riders.
Exactly.
Because they're getting the community engaged. They're really kind of making it accessible for all the different groups, for the women, the children, the more diverse user groups to get into mountain biking, because typically it's always been males, white males for the most part. And so because of that, I think that's really, and in our involvement there, it's really brought to my attention how necessary those styles of trails are, and we've really focused on kind of adapting our trail building style to be able to do that effectively and to be able to kind of hone in that style of trail. So that's why we've been doing more surface trails, chip seal trails. We just did one down in Madison last year, and those style of trails are getting more passes per day than any other trail we're building. We're talking about hundreds of people per hour. Usually, I think some of the trails in Bentonville are getting 160 people per hour.
The trail you built by Leopold and Madison, I hit it on my commute on an e-bike, so thank you.
Yeah.
The 150 miles of trail here, it's quadruples what we have now. What's the model, and how does that, is that double ridership? Is that 10x ridership? And if it's at the high end of that, what are the biggest infrastructure challenges that'll result?
Well, I would say that if we double the amount of riders that come here, I think that would be about where we would want to be. Like, I don't think we want to get too many more riders. What I think we want to do is to make sure that we're preserving the user experience. We want to spread them out, right? We want to get people more out into the backcountry experience where they're having less interactions with other user groups. So, and we're gonna restrict that by really, once again, it's infrastructure, right? We only have so much infrastructure and lodging here, so many people can stay in town. We're developing a few more campgrounds, so we'll be able to get people out into it. But what we're working with the state is to really manage it as a recreation area.
Mm-hmm.
And so, will people have the ability to go out there and just freely camp anywhere? Probably not, because we need to be able to have a revenue source to be able to maintain the entire thing. So it's going to come with a price. And but that cost of people using those campgrounds, using the infrastructure, then portions of that revenue stream will go into trail maintenance, along with parking passes and trail passes. And so we're going to need to develop a funding source of about $500,000 to $600,000 a year just for maintenance. That's pretty much trail maintenance at that point, which is quite a bit. And so we've kind of looked at the model, and it's just like, if we see twice the amount of users, but at the same time all those users coming in, we figure out a way to kind of capitalize off of some sort of fee-based system, like, then we can make it happen.
Do you have any idea what percentage of the economy is based around your sport?
So I would say in most, and so this is just by observation only, there has not been any solid data put together on this yet, but Fort Wilkins, Mariner, most of the owners around here would say 50% of all business coming through Copper Harbor is mountain bikers. 50. It's quite a bit.
Point, as far as economic and employment data goes, in Keweenaw County, it's 70% is all employment based, is in tourism.
Yeah.
So really, tourism in Keweenaw County is the only thing that's happening now.
Yeah.
It's everything, but mountain bikers is the one thing that's been growing especially.
You know, this might be for you and for Nathan, but you just talk about the conservancy that's bought this land. How do you plan going forward through this land being purchased by a conservancy? You know, what you can develop, how you develop your future plans. You know, the constraints and what you could do because the conservancy purchased it. You know, what are those plans going forward based on that land?
Well, fortunately, like, a lot of those discussions happened before the Nature Conservancy purchased it. So they were really aware of the community needs that we had and kind of what our demands of the land were going to be going into it. Obviously we need more trails. But at the same time, we're going to probably need access to envelopes for community housing development, because, like, big problem is, like, our workforce. Like, we don't have a lot of workers up here to kind of meet the demands of the local businesses. So, you know, obviously, like, that, they're a large entity, so, like, there's a lot of hoops to jump through to kind of get through kind of the land use planning process. But the recognition by them is they're kind of just a temporary landowner. They're here, they want to see all this happen, but their goal is to come in and to make sure that the land is bought up right away so it doesn't become more fragmented, more parcelized. And then their goal is to then transition out and see it go back to local units of government. And so we don't know what time frame that's going to happen in, but really what it comes down to is those units of government will be the ones that kind of implement the land management policy, but there'll be a lot more community input throughout that entire process to kind of make sure that we can get from point A to point B.
Could you name specific things that we as mountain bikers, the general public, can do to support trail building? Name it donations, or, you know, getting a permit, or, you know, pass, or what is it that we can do to support?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to recognize that our sport is not free. Like, access to trails is not free. And I think one challenge that we face in small communities like this is like, when we don't have like a user fee for our trail system, which we haven't, because that's always been the norm throughout the industry, is that trails are free, right? But who pays for them? Like, the reality is like the community that lives there pays for them. Whether it's through the volunteerism or whether they do all the fundraising to get the funds to be able to manage it and keep it up. But that's just not, in my mind, that's not a sustainable model. And I think as mountain bikers, I think what we need to do is get out and advocate for a fee, and for people to understand that there has to be, you know, a minimal charge for riders to access trails, because like, we're the users that are using them, right? We're the ones causing the erosion and making it necessary to kind of have all the signage. And it's not always just the local communities that are taxing the system and need to foot the expense, especially communities like tourist destinations like Copper Harbor. I mean, how many riders are there that live in Copper Harbor? There's probably what, 6, 7 of us? And so, you know, if we're going to expand this trail system, like, we have to be able to move to a pay-to-play system. So that requires, like, kind of throughout the entire mountain biking ecosystem for people to understand that that's necessary. And as other major destinations start popping up, it's the same thing. Like, when I talk to land management agencies, it's just like, oh, well, who's going to pay for all this, right? And it's like, so I think we have to start moving to a user-funded system. And then even beyond that, like, I think we just continually we're in a really strong position to start out with, right? Mountain biking was born from grassroots advocacy. People being incredibly involved and ambitious, enthusiastic about their trails. And I don't think, like, we can sit back and take that for granted, number one. Because of the popularity of mountain biking, we almost have a target on our back too. And so therefore, like, you're kind of looked at under the microscope. So people need to continually get more involved, even though there are larger funding sources coming in to fund the development of trail systems, and municipalities are more likely to come up with large amounts of funding to pay for access, for green space to be developed with trails in it. And so, but that means we can't get lazy, right? If we get lazy and we're not involved, like, I think we're going to lose our headway. And so I think, number one, like, stay involved, figure out ways to get more users into the sport, support the young, like the NICA racing leagues, just, you know, support the youth riding groups. Like I think that's the best thing people can do right now, is to continue, like, training the younger groups, like making sure that there's efficacy, right, within the sport. I think that's a big thing that we've kind of lost a little bit, is that, you know, ethics have kind of, like, fallen away with a lot of the gravity riding. You know, like, who has the right of way on the trails, like all that kind of stuff. So I think we need to keep pushing that to make sure that we're looked at as a responsible user group and that we're managing the resource correctly. All right.
I'll throw one out there.
Yeah.
I know you're down by Madison and everything, like by us, and working with Trek, working with NICA, but you mentioned the smaller guys. You know, we all know who you are, I guess, on the most part. But, you know, there's got to be a point where you got to say no too, right? I mean, like working with Trek or working with NICA or working with somebody. And, or is that something? I know that sounds kind of a weird question.
Well, as a larger firm, I wouldn't say we question who we work with. It's more of the size of the contract that we're willing to take on. So for us, like, if anything's under $150,000, it's hard to justify mobilizing teams to the site to take on a project like that. Where there are a lot of smaller contractors that are more well suited for doing systems like that. In which case we have trusted groups of subcontractors and contractors who we work with who will suggest for projects like that. So I think we can still bring a lot of our expertise to the table. We can still, from a planning design perspective, we can still be involved. We can help consult and make them as successful as they can be. But does it mean we're always going to be the one taking it from that planning design to construction if it's a smaller project? Not necessarily. But that doesn't mean we don't want to see each and every project be successful.
That makes sense. I mean, just, do you have any other future plans in developing any areas in UP?
Well, we don't, obviously I think Marquette is more of like a tight-knit group of people who they've developed their own internal crews for being able to develop high-quality trails, and so I think they're ongoing. There's a lot of money being invested into municing. Right now we're doing a design for Days River down in Escanaba area. So there are definitely more destinations popping up, but I think, the thing we have to start thinking about is what does it take to be a destination in today's trail environment? Like, what does it take to be a true destination? And that's a lot of investment, right? And you have to have the right terrain, the right ecosystem, but then you have to have the funding and the energy put behind it as well. So I think that there's a lot of people who want to invest in trails because of the popularity, but what we're trying to do is make sure that we're setting realistic expectations for people going into it as well. You can't build a 12-mile trail system in the middle of nowhere and expect it to be a destination, right? It's probably going to take a little bit more than that to be able to compete with the Marquettes, the Copper Harbors, the Camba, the Duluths. Like, it's just the realities. Those areas are continually moving forward with their investment in the trails, and they have a really robust network as a backbone already. So it's going to take a lot to compete with areas like that.
No, don't.
Does Rock Solid have an international presence?
No, not yet. And we'll see where that goes. We've, a lot of people have contacted us about working internationally, but obviously, like, the amount of paperwork required to actually do business in another country is, like, phenomenal. I mean, we could send crews to places and they could, like, work for other entities and get paid where they already have the business structure set up.
So has that happened?
Yeah, like we've consulted in other countries. Haven't done a ton of construction in other countries. Number one, it's just we've been so swamped with work in the U.S. It just really hasn't made sense. So, but in the future, there are other countries like Costa Rica and stuff that are investing heavily into outdoor recreation, and so there is definitely opportunity.
That was awesome. Mind if we cut you short? We still got to get everyone to finish signing up for rides, and can we start with a round of applause for Aaron? All this stuff.